There has been a troubling pattern of lawlessness sweeping across America. Crime has spiked across the board, with murder rates at the highest in decades. Looting and rioting have seemingly become commonplace. All the while, prosecutors are picking and choosing which laws to enforce and releasing dangerous criminals back onto the streets.
Truth has fallen in the streets. Men are no longer lovers of truth. When you have that rejection of truth, we shouldn't be surprised when lawlessness ascending accompanies that rejection of truth. Because the scripture tells us when truth has fallen in the streets, the next thing that happens is that justice has turned her way backwards and uprightness cannot enter.
We as people have a dual nature. On the one hand, people can do wonderful things. On the other hand, the same person who does wonderful things can also do evil things. And that's why we need the law, and that's why we need the government. And Solzhenitsyn was absolutely right when he said the line between good and evil does not run between countries, it does not run between races, but it runs right through every human heart.
A report by the Council on Criminal Justice found that in 2021, homicides increased by 44% over 2019, with some cities such as Austin, Texas, seeing murder rates skyrocket by 86%.
Human beings have an incredible capacity for evil. And the role of the state is to keep order, to punish crime, and to keep its citizens safe. That's the role of the state.
Our nation was founded on one principle called the rule of law. And that is that all of us have to have some order.
Criminal justice is yet another area where progressives have really taken the train off the track. Their attitude seems to be far more friendly to criminals than it is to the victims of criminals. And a big consequence of that is we get more of both, more criminals and more victims. That should not be the point of criminal justice. It ought to be to produce fewer criminals and fewer victims.
The so-called progressive view has two fatal flaws. First, it has a false view of human nature, seeing human beings as basically good. In reality, humans are fallen in sin, and so there must be restraints on the sin nature. And second, it has a false view of government. Government is not here to parent us. Instead, Romans 13 tells us that government is to wield force to punish wrong and maintain order.
When we have a society that completely rejects the authority of Jesus Christ, the authority of Scripture, the knowledge of God, lawlessness is an inevitable consequence that flows from that. And I think we're witnessing the truth of Scripture play out before us, before our very eyes in this day.
Ultimately, when you forget God, when you turn away from God, things happen. And the things that happen are never good. And what we're seeing now is the result of a number of decades of turning away from God. But we haven't really seen the fruit until now. And what can only be described as madness.
One of the contributing factors to the total lawlessness ravaging America is the crisis at the southern border.
What I don't like about the immigration situation is the use by at least one of the two major political parties to use it to gain votes with other people's money. The attraction of coming to America should be that once you're here, you are free and you're a participant in our system and you create wealth in the process. The attraction should not be come here because Big Daddy government will give you things, and everything from bus tickets to dump you somewhere in the country, to your health care, to the schooling for your kids. I don't think you can have a welfare state and open borders at the same time.
They're not obeying the law, and they're coming in and we don't even know who they are. 600,000 getaways in the last year. That means those are people we don't know who they are or where they went into our country. We've got to get back to the place where we say nations matter, borders matter, value systems matter, our rule of law matters, the system matters. If we want to live in freedom, if we want liberty, we've got to remember the inputs that produce that liberty.
Many note that the rapid spike in crime is correlated to the defund the police movement, which began in 2020.
The police are an essential part of maintaining some civility and order in our culture. To defund them is to advance chaos, is to weaken our way of life and to weaken our society because we have no rule of law.
There's many levels of issues when it comes to what's going on with policing in this country. Obviously, starting with the Obama administration. I mean, Barack Obama did a lot of things to divide this country. I think he will go down as one of the most divisive presidents in our history. And one of them was to start setting many Americans against the police. And raising the specter that there was systemic racism among police in America. There's no evidence of that. I mean, are there racists who were police? Absolutely. Did they do bad things? Of course. They did terrible things and they should be prosecuted. But the idea that there was systemic racism going on in the police departments across America, which Barack Obama pushed forward, it's just not proven by the facts.
When you stop to think of it, the police are the last line of resistance between a civil society and a society that is totally in chaos. So the idea of defunding the police to lessen the presence of police is disastrous, and of course it increases crime. But even more than that, you have instances in which people should be placed in jail where they should be incarcerated, and they are let go. And if I might put it more clearly than perhaps I should, what happens is, in our society, in some places, the police become the villains and the looters become the folk heroes.
You're talking about defunding the police. Like, everyone knows that's crazy talk, but suddenly you're told, no, there's a new reality.
You're seeing more and more crime not being pursued and investigated, people being arrested because of DAs and because of the pressure being put on police with prosecutions and things like that. So, I mean, there are consequences to all this, and the consequence is people are left safe, and people who are guilty are taking control of our streets. That is one of the biggest impositions on freedom that I can think about. If you're afraid to go out of your house, you can say you're free, but if you can't leave your home, you're not very free.
A driving force behind this lawlessness is the billionaire radical George Soros, who has quietly been financing a revolution in the criminal justice system, doling out tens of millions of dollars to radical leftist candidates in district attorney races throughout the country.
George Soros is, the most influential living man involved in politics today, especially in the United States, but also in Europe and really any country he can get his hands in.
We see George Soros funneling money into a lot of campaigns for smaller offices, not just presidential campaigns. And the question that is asked is why? Well, evidently he wants to influence the policies in America.
Now he's backing district attorneys and going way overboard in the local arena. When you have a local district attorney election where maybe someone spends $100,000 or $200,000 on their campaign, and Soros writes a check for $1 million to the competitor, it does make it very hard to compete.
According to the Capital Research Center, between 2015 and 2019, Soros spent more than $17 million on local district attorney races in support of left-wing candidates, winning many of those races.
If you want, nationwide bail reform, well, the odds of that passing the House and Senate is quite low. Regardless of who's in charge, it's an insane policy. But if you can control a district attorney, well, they have discretion over what kind of crimes get prosecuted and for how long, and just all, if bail is going to be set or not, and just what kind of offenses do they really consider offenses, and we've seen the consequences nationwide. No, New York State actually passed bail reform, and this was not Soros-backed, but you see an identical play out of where Soros-backed attorneys have done this, where 90% of crimes are deemed nonviolent and deemed, okay, we won't have bail for these. Well, the problem with that is who determines what crimes are nonviolent? And you have a group of bureaucrats who almost have a far left agenda, and their sympathies are going to be different than yours.
The design of the Marxists is to create chaos. And by having infiltrated our system of government at that level, at the level of the prosecutor and the attorneys that represent the rule of law. And if they are releasing criminals into the community, that's not by accident, that's by design. They are creating uncertainty, they're creating fear, and they're creating doubt of the system. That's what they want in order to produce what they need. It is all part of the Marxist design to create chaos. For them, out of chaos comes a new order.
These things are all working in synchronized fashion to fundamentally transform the United States of America. We are witnessing the manifestation of that fundamental transformation, and the lawlessness through the ranks of the district attorney's offices around the country are just a recent and a modern iteration of that same fundamental transformation.